Expired. Now, Senator D. Smith.
Thank you, Chair. There are only one of two ways to have a look or to understand the budget papers. One way is to regard the government as totally incompetent. Why else would the government have introduced a grief tax? Why else would the government have introduced a donations tax? Why else would the government have increased taxes on mum and dad investors around mineral exploration? If you think the government doesn't know what it's doing, you might come to the conclusion that the government was just incompetent. The other conclusion you can come to is that the government is deceitful. The government knows exactly what it is doing, and it has chosen to tax widowers and widows and was hoping to get away with it. They consciously knew that their taxes would hurt charitable giving, would hurt community and not-for-profit organisations and would hurt philanthropy. And that they hope to get away with, well, in fact, they have actually got away with, because Labor senators from Western Australia are not raising any concerns whatsoever about Labor's plans to tax mum and dad investors in mineral exploration. So, if we are to have an honest debate about the government's budget, there's only one or two pathways you can choose. The government is acting incompetently, or the government is acting deceitfully, that it knows exactly what it is doing. I'm someone who believes the government knows what it's doing. The government was hoping to get away with it, and thanks to the outrage of many ordinary Australians, they've been caught with their hand in the till. There can be no tax cuts, there can be no cost of living relief, there can be no minimum wage benefit if the government does not tackle this. And this is inflation. Inflation eats away at any benefits workers might get through minimum wage increases. Inflation eats away at any cost of living relief that the government might give people through the budget. That is the demon that the government has been unable to control, inflation. And when inflation remains uncontrolled in the economy, guess who pays for that? Pensioners pay for that, families pay for that, small businesses pay for that. The government doesn't pay for it. The government actually is a beneficiary of heightened levels of inflation in the economy. So when the government says cost of living relief, it's because it doesn't want to talk about inflation. And why doesn't it want to talk about inflation? Because inflation is fuelled primarily through government spending. And we know that this government, the Labor government, under Anthony Albanese and Jim Chalmers, supported by Labor senators, we know that this is the highest spending government in 40 years outside the pandemic and outside of a recession. Think about that, the highest spending government in 40 years that is fuelling inflation in the economy because the government lacks the discipline, the government lacks the economic guts to make hard decisions. And when inflation is too high, the RBA is forced to put interest rates up. And who pays for that? Families, especially young families, families with mortgages. So this is a conscious decision by this Labor government to make life harder for Australians, not life easier. And what's really remarkable about that is that in May 2022, when Anthony Albanese, the opposition leader, was working hard to try and become the Prime Minister, he gave people a commitment. He said that life would be easier under Labor. He said it in Perth, Western Australia. Life would be easier under Labor. Australians know there is only one truth, and that is that life has got considerably more difficult for Australians under Labor. Living standards are falling. Productivity growth is slipping. Australians know our country is getting poorer under Labor. Unfortunately, This is a budget of deceit and a budget of broken promises.